Wealth is back in the public spotlight with Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre making allegations about possible conflicts of interest. This comes after the ethics commissioner disclosed some of the details of assets Carney placed in a blind trust. Carney has also set up a series of conflict of interest screens designed to prevent him from making decisions to the benefit of his former employers. Carney's assets are worth millions of dollars spread across dozens and dozens of companies. Blind trusts and conflict screens meet ethics standards, and they are consistent with the past practices of Liberal and Conservative governments. But should the Prime Minister be doing more? Ian Stedman is an associate professor of Canadian public law and governance at York University. Hello, Professor. There was so much talk about Mark Carney's investments, his ethics disclosure during the election campaign. Now that we have finally seen it, and you have finally seen it, what do you think?
I think we all knew that he had a pretty broad portfolio. We just didn't know exactly what was in it. But I don't think anyone's surprised to see the breadth of investments that Mark Carney has in his portfolio.
There are more than 100, there are 103 entities under the conflict of interest screen. It's a pretty substantial number. What did you think when you saw that?
Yeah, I think this is the first time ever we're going to see a sitting prime minister screened from that many different companies. My first impression when I saw that was, oh goodness, that's going to be very difficult to implement a screen of that breadth. I'm curious to see how they're going to do it.
And what do we know? As you say, this is it's a significant number, so there are still questions. But how do you imagine this might work?
Yeah, the best I can tell you is, having read the screen, it looks like he's screened from all 103 companies. And then the chief of staff and the clerk of the Privy Council then have to decide if the issues that would come before him are of a general nature or a general application. And if so, he can contribute to those conversations. But if those companies are disproportionately impacted by the discussions, then he can't contribute to those conversations. So it looks like a 3-step analysis before things can go to the Prime Minister, which is curious, and I'm not sure how that gets operationalized.
I mean, hearing you describe it, it does sound like it has the potential to be a bit messy, let's say, or complex. Is that a cause for concern?
It feels to me a bit cumbersome. I would hope they have tools at their disposal to make it less cumbersome and more efficient, tools that I'm not aware of and that I have not seen. But in the modern era of having an independent ethics commissioner, we've never seen a sitting prime minister with this level of screen. This is new, so I think everyone's going to be learning on the fly as they go.
You talk about not having seen this before. Pierre Poilievre came out yesterday to offer a variety of criticisms of the Prime Minister on this front. He specifically said at one point that this is a cornucopia of conflicts of interest in these investments like we have never seen before as a Canadian Prime Minister. What do you think of Mr. Poilievre's assessment?
Yeah, absolutely. And he's not wrong. We've never seen this before. I mean, there is a difference between being in a conflict or having a conflict of interest and then not properly managing or mitigating your conflicts. Everyone who holds assets has potential conflicts when they take public office. The question is now, can they do what they need to do to make sure Prime Minister Carney mitigates those conflicts and does not put himself in a position to, I think, harm the public's trust in his ability to govern properly.
Based on the information we have right now, how confident are you that will be the case? You're smiling there.
Yeah. I think there's no way he can avoid being in a conflict here and there. I think he's going to have to do the right thing and be transparent about it and explain why he needs to contribute to a conversation about a particular file. I think we'd be crazy to think that he can express an opinion about something and not vote on it, but not have influence over what happens as a result of his opinion being expressed. Like, as long as he's in the conversation, he's going to have influence over the results. There's just no way to avoid that. He's the Prime Minister.
I want to, in a moment, get to the path forward that the Conservatives say ought to be what Mr. Carney pursues. But I just want to stay for a minute on how the process itself is supposed to work. You mentioned a moment ago that it is the Chief of Staff and the Clerk of the Privy Council who are essentially tasked with making sure that this screen works. Now, it's my understanding that that's pretty standard fair that those would be the people involved in this, but some may say, well, those are two of his closest advisors. Is that really wise? Talk to us a little bit about that part of the conversation.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, right? On the one hand, they know his thinking on everything. On the other hand, they're the ones who are closest enough to him to prevent things from getting to him. I think what's unprecedented here is the number. So it looks like it's a significant amount of work that's going to be placed on these two individuals to make sure that they're screening adequately. That's the part that concerns me. But the double-edged sword, everyone is right to call attention to that. They're closest to him, so they know his thinking, but they're also closest to him, so they know how to prevent him from seeing things. But really, is it possible to keep him out of the loop? That's what we're going to have to see. I'm not so sure it is.
And to what extent, to what extent will we see that? Because so much of this does happen in closed meetings. How will we know?
He has an ambitious policy agenda. There are things that are going to come before the public's attention. There are things that are going to be in the media that are going to be scrutinized by yourselves in the media. And so we'll have opportunities to ask him, how did you determine that you weren't in a conflict here? Tell me the analysis where you looked at this and thought that it wasn't a disproportionate impact on this Brookfield company versus the rest of the industry. And we're going to have opportunities to ask him those questions. And I think, the opposition will, just like we all should.
The opposition, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, has said that, in fact, what the Prime Minister should do is sell his investments, turn them into cash, hand them to a trustee who can then invest in a way that is truly blind to the Prime Minister. Also, that should be the new sort of MO going forward. What do you make of that assessment? Is that too much to ask of people in public office?
There's a lot there. I think absolutely that would be the only way for us to know that he's blind to what's in his, share portfolio. But there's more going on in his assets and his portfolio that you couldn't blind him to. So that's one approach. I think the knock-on effect might be that it disincentivizes people wanting to run for public office if they have to divest everything. But I think it's a good suggestion that we should be talking about in the future, especially when people are coming in to become Prime Minister without having first been elected to public office. That's an interesting conversation.
There are so many interesting conversations here, and it is a part of the political life that most Canadians don't think about all that often. So in closing, I guess, what would your takeaway be for Canadians about this issue that has certainly the Conservatives tried to make it a political hot potato during the election campaign, and the indications are they are going to be focused on this, based on the fact that Mr. Poilievre was out yesterday. I think we can expect to hear more from him on this.
Yeah, I think a few points. Historically, politicians will say, I've complied with the ethics commissioner. When the rules in place don't contemplate what we're seeing, compliance may not be enough. And that's an indication that we should be having a real conversation about whether the rules need to be updated. What we have here is an opportunity to learn from something new. And I really hope that Prime Minister Carney doesn't look at this and continue to say, I've complied, but instead says, this is tricky. This is how we're going to do it. This is what's working and this is what isn't working. And we need to have a conversation about how to give ourselves the tools that we need and that the ethics commissioner needs to be sure that our regimes work going forward. I hope we can be self-reflective on this one.
I was going to say, do you think the political environment allows for some thoughtful, self-reflective conversation about these issues?
Do I think the political? No. Not some days it doesn't, and some days it does. It depends on how much hubris we have and how much we are there to serve the people versus serve power. So hopefully we're there to serve the people.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Professor. I appreciate your insights into all of this and some real food for thought there.
Thank you for having me on, and thank you for talking.